Hey, everybody. Welcome to a very special edition of House Calls the Podcast. Today, Ty and I look back on our long career of being podcasters and the 30 episodes we've recorded so far. So this is the 30 for 30. And try to figure out where we've been, where we're going, and if there's a common theme through all of this. I think the common theme is that I'm the mature, sensible one, and Ty is all over the place and needs to be reined in. Besides talking about all 30 of our episodes, of course, we will have to touch on 70s TV shows, and we have to talk about Rocky. One thing that we came across is that we started off as a wellness podcast. We were like, maybe we can help people figure out what works best for them. And we quickly figured out that people can do their own research on that and would probably get a little bored of just hearing us talk about what works for us. And so we've kind of morphed into people that take advantage of opportunities and really discover passions. Everybody that we've talked to has a passion for something. It could be anything from pickleball to writing to photography to wellness to lacrosse or just getting better every day. We talk to people that take advantages of opportunities, such as Tudor, who took more advantages that this country had to offer than anyone that I know, or they saw hurdles as opportunities. Take a look at Katie Yang. Academics was never really her strong suit because of some learning disabilities, but she overcame that hurdle because she wanted to and was passionate enough to make it happen and now has a PhD. We obviously couldn't have gotten here without the help of Nick the Scribe and then Dennis the Scribe and the people in our Dallas office, Maggie and her team down there that handle all the social media. We have a lot of other people to thank besides the 30 guests, the people that have helped us along the way. There's some counselors along the way that we should probably shout out, but there's not enough time and I'm sure I'll forget somebody. But thanks for the 30 so far. There's plenty more to come, and enjoy this look back on our long, illustrious career. Thanks.
Hey, everybody. So welcome to House Calls the Podcast. This is our 30th episode, and today it's just me and Matt. We've had a subset of our audience who's like, we want to hear more from just the two of you on occasion.
Well,
so
that subset is just you and I, actually.
Yes. Yeah. So our biggest fans, who I think are my mom and Franco, the Persian Panther. Other than that, we might want to assume that not everybody's listened to every episode.
I think that's a safe bet. I mentioned something to my daughter Lucy about a previous episode, and she's like, "Oh, how do you know him?" I was like, "Well, we talked to him on the podcast." She goes, "Really?"
So my thought was, if we discuss some of those previous episodes, then people can kind of pick and choose and be like, oh, that one might be for me.
Okay.
But before we do that, we need to talk about a little bit about our purpose, because we've joked that we kind of started off as a health and wellness podcast, and we've kind of been on a run of interviewing people with passions. And we're still health and wellness, but I don't think that there's a huge audience that wants to hear us say, did you sprint today?
Right.
Did you eat celery today? Did you have your broccoli? We need to talk about more than that.
I think that's it. And I think at one point you and I talked about these are the same conversations we were having anyway, but we just hit record now.
Yes.
And
exactly.
I think that's really what this is morphed into. And talking to more interesting people than just you and I.
I was thinking about the people with passion, and I think there's a little bit of a tendency to look at these people and say they have their entire lives together, and that might make somebody else who doesn't necessarily have a passion or searching for their passion maybe be somewhat intimidated. And you mentioned somebody who, we'll just call him the Philly Special.
Yep.
Who mentioned that they were like, why are all these people so, what do you say, intense?
Well, I think there's this subset of all of our tens of listeners that really would like to hear more about the regular guy, the, 5'6", fat, divorced father, those guys. They're still doing, and they're doing it well, and they just haven't found their passions yet. And that's okay, because the people we've talked to, count them lucky, but they've done the work to find their passions. And some people, they're late bloomers, much like myself, much like you with shaving, late bloomer.
I think we have touched a bit on people with passions at all their different ages,
Yep.
but I've been thinking about this a lot for the person who hasn't figured out their passion or hasn't figured out the purpose. So what are we hoping they get out of it? The first thing I'm hoping they get out is just the occasional idea, maybe the occasional inspiration. But I wanted to add something, and this is where I go on a little bit of my sermon.
Oh boy.
Is a book I read probably a year or two ago. It's called The Lion Tracker's Guide for Life. It has one of my favorite quotes, and that quote is, "You don't need to know where you're going, but you need to know how to get there." So a little bit confusing, but what I take that as is you might not know what you want to do with your life. Maybe you're just retired, you don't know what you want to do. Maybe you're young, you don't know what you want to do, but you need to know how to get there. So how do you get there? And this is where the Clever podcast, I think he touched on it a little bit when he talked about the Trinity. So for those people who don't know, Clever is an artist, but he's also an athlete. And he talked about the Trinity. And for him, the Trinity kind of meant like working on his physical strength, his spiritual strength, his intellectual strength. And I don't know what category he would put his artistic strength in there. I guess that was a combination of spiritual and art. Yeah. But I think that somebody, so say you're at this period in life where you don't really know what you want to do next. You can always pour your energy into trying to get in shape, trying to improve your intelligence, meaning read something that makes you a little bit more intelligent, and then even work on your spiritual strength. So
Well,
whether that's like get into yoga, get into meditation, read whatever scripture or book would help you on that way.
much like your quote about the Lion's Guide to the Galaxy or whatever you just made up, in my other studio, I've got this print, and the quote is, "When you stumble, make it part of the dance." And so the way I read that, or listen to that, is it's okay to fall down. It's all part of the process of figuring out what your passion is. And I think from the 29 people we've talked to so far, they have lots of different passions, right? They don't have to have just one. And it's like, you know what? I'm just going to meditate. These people have, Brian Klepper does not just pickleball. He does like two other things, which is pretty special. But he found something that he likes to do. But it goes with everything else he likes to do with his family. I think he plays golf and paddle boards. But I think that's it. It's not just you're not just a one trick pony.
Yeah. And I think getting into that area of the fitness thing is that it is important to be fit, and we can talk a lot about that, and we've talked to a lot of athletes, and we talked to Allison, who was the Iron Woman, and she does those extreme races. But what I really got out of that podcast was more just the making the time to schedule for your training. And that doesn't mean that if you're somebody who has to go do an Ironman, but you look at that podcast and you're like, man, if she can do that, I can schedule a 3-minute walk 3 times a week,
Right.
plus a stretching session twice a week, and a push-up session or a sprint session or some weight training or TRX or whatever. And the idea is not to intimidate you and say, oh my gosh, I can never do an Ironman. The thing is to be like, hey, that's her thing. She is a gifted athlete to start off with. She has determination, but you can get inspiration from her without necessarily having to copy what she's doing.
Absolutely. And I think that goes along with, Philip Birmingham. Same thing. Here he was outside of Liverpool, 16 years old, and wanted to help his community and joined the police cadet program. Next thing you know, he ends up in Bermuda looking for something to do, takes a photography class, and then he becomes a world-renowned photographer. He thought he was going to be a policeman and maybe taking pictures of crime scenes for the rest of his life, but it's just morphed into something else. And it just puts himself out there and tries different things. And I think that's why it works.
That's probably a lesson for some of these kids who are getting out of high school or getting out of college, who they think that they have to find the perfect job to start off. And sometimes just your first job is purely just a stepping stone.
Yep.
And what you really
Just
need
get
to
your
do
foot
is
in the
get
door.
out there,
That's it.
meet people. And maybe you're just meeting the person who's going to write you that incredible letter of recommendation, or maybe you're meeting that person who's going to say, hey, you know what, you guide you, kind of like when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
That's right. And I think you said in one of the podcasts, back in your little world, you thought everyone was either a doctor, lawyer, or a baker. And now as you get older, you figure out people have lots of different jobs and lots of different careers. And there's so many different paths you can go underneath, the healthcare umbrella. You don't have to be just a doctor or a nurse. There's all these, you can be a scrub tech. You can be all these different things. It's just getting your foot in the door.
Yeah. And there's some things like we had one person write in, Amy from Brooklyn Park. She had no idea what went into college sailing. So when we talked to Xander, there was that whole element where some people don't even know that that is an option. Even the fact that his mom was an All-American showing up just on campus, and they said, "Hey, you're athletic, you're the right size, let's get into sailing." I think that's also a thing to say, hey, when you go to college, look for those opportunities.
That's right. And I think even going back to Steve Brown, talk about different opportunities. Here's a guy who, as a kid, was performing on the road with his family, and then all of a sudden he's like, yeah, doctor kind of stuff. This is kind of interesting. And he just keeps putting himself out there. And next year he's the team doctor for the Wizards and just the Caps and doing all this different stuff. But you never know where the path is going to take you. And he's another one of those fascinating people that I would not have met without this podcast.
I think that might have been our most inspirational
100%.
Podcast, and two parts just because of his medical issues and his positive outlook on life. For me, just to remind myself to be like, it's a privilege that I get to see patients and kind of lift you up every day. Like, don't get into monotonous routine where it's just another, you got to see the next patient, you got to see the next patient. Like, he brings joy to his work and kind of inspires everybody.
I mean, how many people did we hear from that have talked about, their whole family has gone in for generations because of not, just his medical skill, but his bedside manner, for a lack of a better term. And that's why people keep going back to a guy like that.
And it was funny. And this was a line I used before, but I think we joked that we didn't know that he was a member of the Partridge Family, because when he was talking about the singing and the different instruments and all the stuff they were doing, I think we didn't know that going in, that he was in a musical group. I knew that he sang in the OR, but I had no idea that he was basically the equivalent of the Partridge Family. Oh. But that also gets me to think is that for younger listeners, the Partridge Family was a show when we were very young, 70s. We probably watched reruns. It might have been late 60s, but it was about a family where the whole family was a band, but they had a manager named Reuben Kincaid. And I was joking today, we are looking for our Reuben Kincaid. We need a manager.
We do. He does not have to wear a sleeping mask, but whatever. No.
We're like Mickey Goldmill in Rocky 1 when he starts telling the story about he had no manager. If he had only had a manager, he could have been a contender type of thing. We're looking for a manager. So if you're out there, just reach out to us.
Only you would know it was Mickey Goldmill. You're unbelievable. Your Rocky knowledge. And you know what? You could have made it up. I was like, yeah, no, that makes sense. And how come they never really got into whatever happened to Mr. Partridge?
I don't know. I think there's some suspicion that he was the professor on Gilligan's Island and he got lost to sea.
That brings it all together.
So actually, that's not true. What is true is that he was Carol Brady's first husband, because Mr. Brady was a widow. They never mentioned Carol Brady's husband in the first episode. And when the actor, I think his last name was Reeves, left the show, they wanted to keep going. And Sherwood Schwartz, the producer, almost did that, where they brought the actor who played the professor, who on top of that, he was like a fighter pilot or something in World War II. And this is part of the problem. I have so much useless knowledge.
I mean, it's unbelievable. So you're saying that Mrs. Partridge's first husband had 7 kids, and he only took 3 girls with him when he started dating Mrs. Brady, and he left the other 4 because the other 3 couldn't really. But the other 3 had a singing group also.
Yeah. So
all right, we'll cut that.
So the original Partridge Family also did the great Chucky Cunningham move, where the little kid, there was an extra boy. There was Donnie Partridge, Keith Partridge, and there was another boy.
Yeah, he was there, but he survived the whole time. He survived. He survived. Yeah. He was always there.
Yeah. So how about back to the podcast?
Okay. I think that makes sense.
Do you remember my blog I sent you about Rocky?
Yes. How can I forget?
If you're looking at the very beginning of Rocky 1, and it's like he's got nothing going on.
Right.
He's a leg breaker for a two-bit loan shark, and he's in a bar. And Apollo Creed comes on the equivalent of 1976 Sports Center, and another guy in the bar is like, "That guy's a jerk or whatever." And Rocky's like, "No, he's great. He took a shot. He worked really hard. He's a great role model, whatever." So Rocky was not a hater. Like Rocky appreciated his
Here he had
greatness, and
respect. He respected the
I think
game.
that's a good way to go through life. Like appreciate what other people are doing. And that's why some of these guests, you might look at them and say, "Oh, they have it all together." Well, appreciate that. Like that should be inspiration to all of us. And
Yeah.
then when Rocky got his shot, he took advantage of it. And then he's the classic person. When the student's ready, the teacher appears, Mickey shows up, he starts running, he starts working out. Adrian shows up, he finds his life partner. But when I watched that movie the first time, I was like, "Oh, if you just work super hard, you can do anything in life."
Right.
And in reality, Rocky had to work on his weaknesses. He had horrible footwork. Mickey had to teach him all his footwork.
Because
And it
women
never,
weaken the legs. Women
yeah,
weaken the
it
legs.
was. But the point was, his footwork was not going to be as good as Apollo Creed's. Like it just was never going to happen. Then he had to figure out what his strengths were. His strengths were going to the body. So he recognized what his strength is, and he recognized what his weakness is, and then he set realistic goals. So he realized the night before the fight that he was not going to beat Apollo Creed. Apollo Creed was bigger, stronger, faster, more experienced. In that fight, he was not going to beat him, and he set his goal to basically go the distance, and so he would prove to himself and the whole world that he wasn't just another bum from the neighborhood. So that's kind of what I'm saying for these people who might be ready for inspiration, that they don't have to, if they do a bunch of wall ball. So if they start doing wall ball at 6:30 in the morning, like TJ Malone did, they're not necessarily going to be the PLL rookie of the year.
No,
because they had like, it was like TJ was a really cool story, very dedicated. He was a late bloomer. He said his driver's license said he was 5'2", but if you're 5'2" and you do wall ball every day, you might want to remember that it sounds like he got recruited to that high school at 5'2". So he was already pretty good when he got to that high school.
absolutely. And I think the other part of that is his rehab and his workout to overcome these injuries. I think that's the inspirational part. Like he could have been like, you know what, this is it. I'm not coming back. I don't want to put the effort in to come back just to play lacrosse. And it's time for me to move on. But no, he wanted to be a part of that community, part of that team. And he turned out obviously better than before and becoming even a bigger part of that team because of his mentorship and his role as a leader. That's what I took away from that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think from an orthopedic rehab point of view, his passion is what drove his rehab.
Sure.
You know,
Absolutely. Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. It's his makeup. It's what Rocky's what he's had left in the basement, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And he had a ton.
And if you get, not you, if anybody got hurt playing a sport that was just kind of like their thing they did on the side, they might make a different choice. Like,
sure,
it doesn't mean you have to do that. You know,
right.
You have a different path. You have to have your own path.
Exactly. We've talked to writers and photographers and painters, but it's just people that are passionate and have found a path, because there are so many different paths you can go down. You can start here and pivot and work away. It's probably not, it's never point A to point B. There's a lot of little cutoffs along the way to get to where you need to go.
And you can also try new things. I mean, I think that was one of the cool things about Clever. I think we all assumed that he was pulled aside in the second grade and they were like, "Oh, you have artistic talent. We're taking you down to this classroom." And he didn't even start doing art until after school. He didn't start like playing lacrosse until after his wrestling career was over. It was like, that was pretty enlightening.
Clever's his buddy's mom was a graphic designer, and she's like, "Hey, you want to try play with these pen set?"
Yeah.
There you go. It's just interesting where it's going to come from. And like you said, you just have to be open to everything, because you don't know where it is.
And I think some planning probably does help, like, especially if you're doing something that you might not be able to do forever. Like, that was a cool thing about Philip, the Birmingham, with the photography, was he was like, "Why would I ever retire? Right. I love it." But there probably are some jobs that you can't do forever. Like people aren't going to play professional sports forever. So it is a good idea. So you're not surprised to start putting in a little bit of the work about like, what are some other things that I want to get passionate about? So you don't get stuck.
Yeah, none of these people have just one passion. It might be the what's the top of mind, writer, artist, but they are also members of families, members of communities, have other interests, movies, reading, golf, whatever it is, yoga.
Dungeons and Dragons. Austin was great. And he has several passions, which was cool that his job as a physical therapist was his passion, his love of lacrosse. And we got a little bit on lacrosse thing, but like he admits, like he is not the TJ Malone of lacrosse, but he just loves it, and he keeps doing it, and he has this opportunity with Team Portugal. But that was one of my favorite.
Absolutely. Because he was able to take his love of lacrosse, turn it into the passion of helping people get healthy again. Then all of a sudden find nationality with his roots in Portugal and be able to play lacrosse and help them with their, PT as well. It was just crazy. Just being open to everything. It brought it all together. And it was all because his mom kicked him out of the house and wanted him to go do something.
Yeah. So that led to the opportunity where I did a podcast with Yanni of True Sports, which I love their model, how they're doing physical therapy, but they're also doing strength training and, prehab, rehab, everything. And it's funny because that was a less joking around talking about Rocky podcast and a more straightforward talking about orthopedics and physical therapy. But it was really interesting. It was a fun time.
Yeah. But how many people listen to that? 3?
No.
You and Terry and Brian?
I think it was millions. No, I don't know. Millions. But you visited them, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah, I did. And then next thing you know, my family, basically everyone in my house is going to see to them for different ailments.
And your daughter had a horrible splinter?
Horrible splinter. We almost had to call shock trauma. And I said, before we do that, should we call Dr. House? And she, in a panic, said, no, he doesn't know what he's doing either. So anyhow, but it's out now and all is forgiven because she did it by herself. And that's...
Oh, she pulled it out herself?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, that's nice.
She wouldn't let anybody else do it.
Okay.
She's like, you don't know what you're doing. I'm like, I'll call Ty. She goes, he doesn't know what he's doing either.
It kind of got me thinking when I first started doing this, it started off with blogs and on the website and basically physical therapy videos. And Nick, the scribe, who's now Nick, the podiatry student, was kind of that when Nick and I were talking about it, we're just looking for one person. We just want one person to buy in and be like, you know what? I started doing those physical therapy exercises for my back, or I took some of that nutrition advice, or I started thinking about taking control of my own health. And we're like, we just need that one person. And it is pretty cool because at work, I start getting people who are saying, hey, I watched that podcast. It was inspirational. And yours and Steve Brown's are the two that the most people mention. And I think it's cool. And they're, for whatever reason, there's a lot of people who, whether they're sober or they're just drinking less, that is out there in the zeitgeist right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, today's a big day for me.
I thought, you're right. Okay. Yeah. Are we going to tell that story?
that I stopped drinking after your wedding?
Yeah. We might have already mentioned that.
Probably already did, but it was it was your wedding. So
and nothing bad happened at the wedding.
It wasn't. I was already planned on going away when I got. But I kept telling my parents like I can't go this weekend. I got a party, and then Ty's getting married in 2 weeks. I can probably make it after that. And that's what I did because I kept pushing it.
So it's been 32 years, but that's not the way they recommend doing it, is it? No. Like they don't recommend being like, wait till my buddy's wedding.
Go in, wait for it. But that was the kick that I needed because I saw you and our other friends advancing in their lives, and I wasn't. And so it's just being open to that instead of poor me. It's like, wait a second, you got to do the work to get where you want to go. And I think that's really what I've learned a lot from myself from all of this. Even Stacy and Beth, they're like, hey, I didn't start off this healthy. I did the work to get to this, and I've done different things along the way, and it's trial and error. And I think that's the same for everything. You got to be willing to do the work because that's when the best stuff happens, when you do the work for it. Yeah, from my episode, I've had 4 other people who have enjoyed listening to that and helped them on their path to
Yeah.
sobriety.
Yeah.
And so those are the things, like you said, if you can help this one person, it's totally worth it. So I'm always happy to share my story or all these stories with somebody, because if it helps them or entertains them or gets them interested in something, that's awesome.
And to follow up on that, I think Heron's uh, podcast was great,
Oh
and
yeah,
I think our take home message from that was like to put yourself out there,
right.
um, and that I think at all ages you have a hesitancy to put yourself out there, and everybody does. It's in
Sure.
the back of your mind, be like, I don't want to look like an idiot. And he made the point that nobody's watching.
Right.
You know?
Right. Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. No one's watching because they're all worried about themselves. And yeah, that's 100% true.
And it's funny with like the different challenges, it's pretty easy to, people, when you do the push-up challenge, you're doing it in private. You're not doing push-ups, although I think we caught Franco doing push-ups this morning on his deck. And the the walking challenge, he looks amazing. He's 60 years old. I know, he's 60 years old. He's amazing. He probably doesn't even want me to say that because he looks like he's 40. He looks like he's 40. Anyway, the point is anybody can do the walking challenge because you're just going out and walk. But the sprinting challenge, like, you're kind of like, people at our age probably don't look as good sprinting as they imagine or as they used to. But it's still good to be like, get out there, try something new.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And look at Jack Frack. He was
Yeah.
trying different things along the way to get where he wanted to go. If it was changing schools in high school, going to a school that wasn't right around the corner to get a better opportunity for what things he wanted to do in his future. It's just being open to saying yes to different opportunities. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It's pretty powerful.
The take home message from that one, which I would want everybody to get out of it, is, he's the 3.5 year, 4 year starter for Penn State, took him to 2 Final Fours, but he still said at those moments when maybe things were not going as great, he looked into the stands and looked for his family, and he was like, they love me anyway.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Which
is funny for those people who saw the ESPN game and the story of the Holy Water. I really think there was one time where Jack was looking up into the stands and he was like, where's my dad? Because his dad was down putting the holy water on the field.
And instead he sees you.
Before you came on board as my Huckleberry, I interviewed Franco. And with Franco, the big take home message was that he came home from work and Jack wanted to play a sport. Like, Jack was the kid who always wanted to be out there playing. You can't make your kid do that. You can't force a passion on your kid. All you can do is maybe expose them to a lot of things and hope that they find something that they love in life. And hopefully it's multiple things. But the drive was from Jack, and all Franco could do was support it. It's not the opposite. Franco was not making his kid do stuff. And Franco is his son's biggest fan, and a shout out to Franco. He's every kid's biggest fan.
Absolutely.
Like, if you're out there doing something, Franco's cheering for you.
Yep. And don't you think that's a lot what Sheehan Birch was saying? Sheehan, her and her husband, great athletes in college and beyond. If the kid asks them, then they'll give them their feedback, but they don't force their passions, their loves onto their kids. It's more the other way. Hey, you bring it to me, I'll share it with you. And I think it's pretty powerful to recognize that as a parent.
Yeah, and I think that's hard because I think what we don't realize is that, like, what is it? Our brains aren't fully developed until I think we're 27, maybe it is. So you forget that when you're an adult and you're watching your kids play sports, your brain's fully developed. Their brain's not fully developed.
Yeah, it is funny. I think if you look back at all of them, the 30 so far, there's been a couple of themes and it's usually about family and community. And what that means to different people, but how that inspires them and wants them to be part of it and lift up that spirit, that community as well through their actions and be a integral part of those communities. And I think, every one of them, that was the takeaway.
And, one thing we haven't gotten into, I would love to find a guest to really dive deep into this, is that uh, there takes a special kind of courage to quit a passion, like to be like,
Yeah.
hey, this is no longer my passion. Um, and like some people, because we interviewed Ryan, my son, and he is somebody who gets into stuff. Like he has
He digs
passions,
in.
but he has to move on to different passions sometimes. Whether it was the music, I think we joked around a little bit about his childhood passions like Transformers and Thomas the Tank Engine and Harry Potter books, and then
Lizards.
music and lizards and reptiles, and how he wanted to be a corn snake breeder. But he's just somebody who just loves getting into
Yeah.
stuff.
That's just who he is.
And he honestly gets that from his mom.
Yeah.
His mom is like, goes from like, at age 50, she started playing tennis and like pretty much was playing 5 days a week. And then she quickly, after she had some knee injuries, quickly transferred to getting super into horses.
Right.
And that was her dream since she was a child. And the message that was, I think that was the classic middle age thing, is that just because you're a little bit older, don't put off your dreams. Like if
Right.
you've always wanted to do something. And my aunt was like that. My aunt had always dreamed of being a pilot. And I think, how old was she? 70 when she got her
Yep.
pilot's license, 65 when she got her pilot's license. It's just like, if you have that dream, don't give up on it.
Exactly. Age is just a number.
Emma's going to kill me if we
I
don't
know.
bring her up.
I've been thinking about how to weave her in, but let's just say it. Emma was the best one ever, the cutest, best smile, no lisp, but that's okay.
Yeah. So the no lisp joke is that she no, we can put that on there because it is a funny story. Was she said that she was in speech therapy because she couldn't roll her R's and she didn't want to get made fun of, so she worked so hard to not roll her R's. And then right around the 8th grade, when she stopped rolling her R's, that's when boys started paying attention to her. And then her husband said, yep, that's the first thing I noticed was how well you rolled your R's. But with her podcast, I think she touched on some really good things.
Sure did.
That was when it was mostly about nutrition, wellness, and fitness. And it's a hard thing to tell a kid going off to college, hey, you need to listen to this podcast, because it makes it look like there's a problem with them that you're telling them to listen to it. But she touched on some things that I think a lot of kids that age touch on.
Yeah.
And one of them that I thought was really good was the whole thing about how she was eating like a lot of like protein bars and protein shakes and doing all this stuff that was still not real food. And so she wasn't as healthy as she is now, even though her weight was okay. And the way she knew she wasn't as healthy as she is now is things like her skin, her hair thickness, how fast her hair was growing, that kind of stuff. And then also just figuring out which exercise is the one you want to do. You know, kind of like just make it like brushing your teeth. You have to exercise. You have to move your body. And from an orthopedics perspective, life is a journey. Your body's what's going to take you on that journey. You don't want your body to be a cage that keeps you from doing stuff.
No, it's an asset.
And when I say that kind of stuff, I clearly understand that some people have diseases, injuries that just modern medicine cannot overcome. But I'm talking about, for most of us, it's like, start taking care of your body when you're young. And that's why I'm going to hammer back what Clever was talking about, that Trinity. Part of that is being a physically capable human being.
Yep. And to be ready. Just to be ready.
Yep.
You know, if someone needs him, he's ready.
And then to not pigeonhole yourself, I interviewed, before you came on, Sarah Corcoran about just being out in nature and stuff. And one thing that I knew about her was, I think sometimes people think, oh, going on these solo hikes, that's just for men, or things like that. And it can really be anybody. I found interesting, and I thought her podcasts about being in nature and how nature has helped her. She's a cancer survivor. That we all could benefit from. And I think that sometimes we have a tendency to not realize that what we really need is to go for a walk in the woods. Yeah.
Keep it real simple. I mean, absolutely. And along those same lines is Jennifer Klepper, right?
Yeah.
Here's somebody that had talk about having different passions and different things along the way. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of jobs, and I say jobs, but they're just things that she's gotten into along the way. It was sewing, it was monogramming, and it was entrepreneur stuff. She was an attorney already, and then giving back. And then it was like, you know what? I have a story I want to tell. And then I have another story I want to tell. And I want to publish it myself, and learning the tricks of the trade and putting herself out there to get that writers community around her to help her get to where she wants to go, at the same time still being a mother and having a full-time job. I thought that was fascinating about how she was able to juggle all those different roles.
And how she builds community. She
Right.
encourages everybody to be reading. She's encouraging everybody to write, whether it be a pamphlet, a novel, a blog. She's encouraging everybody to do that.
Yeah. So I think, we've had a lot of great people so far. I'm excited about all the people we have lined up for the next batch of 30 plus
Yeah.
to come forward.
And then with the one thing I was going to say while we were talking about that is there also is, if you're looking for your opportunity, and I think this is where Michael Broomfield was just like, if you're a nice guy, and you're a hard worker, and you treat people well, things are going to work out.
Absolutely.
Like he told the story about dropping the big wig's goose and seeing it float away. And I think some people would get fired for that.
Absolutely.
But he handled it the right way. And you could tell from the comments that he's just considered this incredible gentleman.
Yep.
I recently saw a meme that I've really been thinking about. Was they say, like, when somebody starts like bragging about how great they are, or how great their kids are, how accomplished their kids are. And this one guy was like, his go-to is, he's like, are they cool? And he doesn't mean like Fonzie cool, or
right.
like the popular kid. And the person will look at him funny and be like, what do you mean cool? And he's like, do you like hanging out with
right.
them? Like, are they fun to hang out with? And the guy goes on to be like, I love hanging out with my kids. You forget that that's an important quality. Like,
Absolutely.
Be a friendly person who people like to hang out with.
Xander, TJ, Michael, that you just want to get to know more about, and people we've already known, but got to see this different side of them that leads me to more questions and want to know more about them after the podcast.
And I think there is a common thread of all 29 guests, is that I think they're all people who have a pretty positive outlook on the world.
Yeah.
And my one advice to kids would be, don't get too caught up in the news at an age where you're a kid, or an age where you're trying to build something. So whether it's retirement, middle age, kid, whatever, there's a time in your life where you need to build yourself, and don't get all caught up in your head in the news.
Just keep moving forward. Keep moving
forward. Practice the clever trinity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thanks for listening, and make sure you're subscribing out there, and we'll keep them coming.
So the other thing, though, is that your passion can sometimes be off the beaten path. And that's where, like, Ben Johnston, my nephew, who is a fishing, hunting guide, and has this incredible life doing something that I think a lot of us dream of doing on our vacations, or even full time. And I thought that was fascinating, how he got into it, how he's trying to make a business of it. But that's not the path for everybody, because you can't just like it to do that.
No.
You have to love it. And then he,
even
at this age, has had some mentors that said, hey, here's some of the problems, how you can burn out if you're going to the same fishing spot every day. Like, he seems like he's figuring out a way to see the world while he's doing it.
Absolutely. And like you said, he's got mentors, but he also had support along the way from his family, that it wasn't like, you know what, I'm just going to give this a shot. He's like, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to learn how to do this and do this correctly, and understand more than just to find the best fishing holes. He understood the world around that he was living in. So I thought that was pretty special.
And a little bit of a shout out to really one of the reasons why this whole podcast, Amy Faranic who's a PA, and myself are in the same office. And then we have Dennis, the scribe. And then we have a girl named Mary Kate sometimes, who's a medical assistant.
But she's in the
And
laundry
we'll
room.
all start talking about health and wellness. And at one point, Amy was like, this needs to be a podcast. You know, all the different sayings, all the different things we talk about. We're like, you need to have a health and wellness podcast, which was funny because I think she was like the third or fourth guest. It was a very good one. It talked about health and wellness and her as a cancer survivor. Right. And there's a lot of useful information, but we didn't have all the interesting things to be like, she was the weightlifting champion of North County High. She was first team all-state softball player, you know, blazing on the base paths. We looked it up in the Baltimore Sun, and I didn't even touch on any of that stuff, you know. And I'm like, oh, so we are going to have Amy back now that we're a two-man team and we're way more professional and we have our technology, because she was a great guest. But the other thing that happens is a lot of people text us and they think they didn't do a great job. And I think it's natural as you're like, oh, why didn't I ask this? Why didn't I ask that? We do that every time. We do it ourselves. So if you're a guest, do not feel bad. You did great. And some of the ones that that we didn't realize were great, really were good, but we didn't realize it when we were doing it. And sometimes I'm even like, was I even there? I don't even remember that part.
How about Tessa Collins?
Yeah.
I mean, Tessa was, even when we spoke to her, she was an assistant at Gibson Island. And now she she was interviewing for other jobs and she put it on her resume, and where she is now, they looked at it. And so they got a better sense of her. And according to her and her family, it helped her very much to get her next job. So,
and you can see why her enthusiasm and her energy level is up there with Emma House on enthusiasm. And she is the most patient of all of our guests.
Yes.
Because it was like, what was it, 45 minutes of you not being able to work our computer?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It was you. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah. So we've had some, great ones, and, we're learning as we go. We're only as good as our guests. So I'm looking forward to learning more and getting better.
And it's been super fun.
Totally fun. Totally fun.
And if you have a guest that you want us to interview,
let us know.
We're happy to talk to everybody. And it does not have to necessarily be a health and wellness person. It can be anything, just anybody who's interesting.
Yeah. Anybody who wants to talk to us, we'll talk to them.
Just because.
Good stuff. All right, brother. Well, good work. Thanks for inviting me along.
Okay.